Hello, welcome to Algorithms. My name is Saurabh. Today we are going to discuss about how to detect and respond to threats using Azure environment in Australia. And this reference architecture is pretty much aligned with the Australian Cybersecurity Center requirements. It's not that the other customers located in different geographies cannot use it, because I have used a lot of other components as well that makes it whole. But in this case, it is very specific to Acsc requirements. So what you may need to do is just look at this reference architecture. You can draw your own and then map it with the requirements specific to your geography if you would like, and that is going to help you put together a custom reference architecture for your organization. Okay, so let's get started. As you know that logging, auditing, and visibility is an important component, and as I mentioned that ACSC and ISM manual guidelines have been taken into consideration to make sure that all the information which is flowing through your network is actually collected from different source plus analyzed. Now, what are the different components that you may need to use, that we will discuss. But first, let me tell you a couple of requirements just from a high level so you know what we are talking about. So from the ACSC requirements, when it comes to logging, auditing, and visibility, there are certain guidelines specifically mentioned in their ISM manual that you can refer. So for instance, that ACSC recommends that Commonwealth entities forward all mandated security logs to the ACSC for whole of Australian government monitoring. Now you see, this is very important point, because you have to collect those security logs and you have to publish to the government entities as well for the further monitoring purpose. Now, to assist in risk mitigation, Commonwealth entities should configure their Azure subscriptions as enable Azure Security Center, upgrade to the standard tier, enable automatic provisioning of the Microsoft Monitoring Agent to support Azure VMs, regularly review, prioritize, and mitigate the security recommendations and alerts on the Security Center dashboard. So these are some of the requirements I mentioned, but there are other compliance as well specific to your industry vertical that you may need to look at, that may make it complete, but you have to make sure you have this as a part of your ingredient when you are trying to put together a reference architecture or a security architecture. And the focus is how do you collect data, how do you audit it, and how do you provide visibility to your organization plus the organization which requires this data from the compliance perspective. So from the component perspective, from the log source point of view, for instance, there are different functions. So log source is our first function. What are the different component of log sources? Application gateway, VPN gateway, Azure firewall, network appliances, load balancer, NSG, Azure activity log, diagnostic log, Azure policy. So these are the different components. That's where you need to collect the logs. And then the collection perspective, what are the different components that you can use? So you can use Event Hub, you can use Network Watcher, you can use Log Analytics. From the retention perspective, I think most of the architect, even if you are not in security, you know Azure storage. Analysis perspective, you can use Azure Security Center, you can use Azure Advisor, you can use Azure Analytics solution, for instance, traffic analytics, DNS analytics, activity log analytics. Lot of customers are also using security information and event management systems as well, from predictive analytics point of view. So it really depends what sort of industry vertical you are in. If your compliance says, or if you foresee that security is one of the important area, and there are a lot of threat vectors, you may need to implement a CM solution which helps you with orchestration of security as well as automation of response. Incident response, you can use alerts and Azure automation. From the guidelines perspective, I would say that validate the region availability of services. So whatever services you want to use, make sure that those services are available in that region. And identify and prioritize the logging, auditing, and visibility on high value systems, as well as all network inbound and outbound points to systems hosted in Azure. You need to consolidate logs and minimize the number of instances of logging tools such as storage accounts, log analytics workspaces, and event hubs. You can restrict administrative privileges through role-based access control. So these are some of the general guidelines, and if you go to Microsoft website, or if you talk to Azure experts or maybe security experts, they might give you the similar guidelines plus lot more, because our focus is just to make sure that we cover this reference architecture, and we are talking in relation to this reference architecture. But as you start to deep dive in each area, you will have guidelines for each area, that how do you set up security controls for different areas or different components that I mentioned in my previous presentations. Now from the there will be a component guidance as well for log source, that how do you control and manage logs, and then how do you process events. From the application gateway perspective, you can refer to application gateway documentation from the vendor that you are working with. From the VPN gateway perspective, you can refer to Australian government specific VPN gateway guidance plus VPN gateway documentation from the vendor. Similarly, for Azure firewall, you can look at the documentation from the configuration perspective, but from the security controls perspective, you have to refer to different institutions, and it all depends upon what your organization or your chief security officer has decided, or in terms of design for as a security principle that you have to follow. Network compliance, same, Azure load balancer, virtual machine, because you have to collect data from virtual machines as well, and how you stream virtual machine logs to event hubs that you need to establish and that you need to configure in case you are doing it, not for all the assets but for the important application. NSG Network Security Group, you can look at the flow of logging for network security groups, means how data is collected. So you can look at the documentation plus log network traffic to and from virtual machine using the Azure portal. How do you do that? There are tutorials available. Similarly, there are a lot more other components. It will take a couple of days if I start talking about each component, but I guess it's a good point of start if you just take this reference architecture and start mapping from here, because it covers all the components, plus it covers all the recommendations from the Australian government. So it is going to be a good reference, and you can draw on top of it based upon what is the security design principle given to you by your organization. Okay, I guess this is it from my side. I'll cover more topics uh, on on cloud security, specific to requirements from Australian Cybersecurity Center. So it is going to be focused on Australian region or Commonwealth region. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.